Welcome, everybody, to week 3 of Workshop Wednesday. My name is Mike Leitzke, and I'm your host. Tonight, I am very excited to be joined by two folks out in California. We're going to talk about indoor and outdoor things and what they've had going on for the past little bit. So super pumped to talk with them and hear what they've had going on. But before we get going, of course, want to say thank you to ADLA, CWE, and SCGC for their sponsorship of this webinar series. We will be doing these every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central Time on Wednesdays up until the week before Thanksgiving. So we've got a few more going. Next week, we've got a big one with Brian Dinkle and Scott Johnson of the Blue Devils. So we're going to keep it on the West Coast to talk with those guys. But here we've got Stephen Estudillo and Matt Hartwell to talk with us about Chino Hills and Pulse Percussion and Clara Vanguard and Pacific Crest. So how you guys doing?
We're good. We're doing great. We're both excited to speak with you tonight, Mike. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, it's
a little easier for you if we were in the same room, so that we wouldn't have all the lag.
Yeah, it's awesome to see people together. It's been a little while since we've seen something like that, so super cool.
Yeah, we were thinking maybe we would socially distance at first and we would just show each other's laptop, but that one didn't work out too well with his laptop over there and mine here, so this is just easier. So
well, I'm sure you all have done the rapid tests, so everybody's safe, you know, you can't take any chances.
That's right. Yep, for sure.
Cool. Well, I imagine some of the folks that are on here might be familiar with you guys, but just to make sure everyone is on the same page, if you don't mind just giving a little bit of a brief overview of, how you got started in the marching arts and what you've been doing for the past little bit. So Stephen, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah. So I started marching at Pacific Crest when I was in high school. I spent several years there in the early 2000s. And then I went on to march at the Cavaliers in the later parts of the 2000s. When I aged out, I started teaching. Right after I aged out in 2009 was my first year teaching on staff with both Pacific Crest and the Cavaliers as a visual staff member. And then in 2010 is when I started designing for Pacific Crest. I was the drill designer there. I've actually been the drill designer there since 2010, with the exception of 2 years. I took a small hiatus for 2 years. And I also stayed involved teaching at the Cavaliers, where I served as an assistant caption head and then a visual caption head from the years from 2011 to 2015. Right around 2015, I started a family. I had to take a little bit less time on the road, do a little bit more of the work at home in the planning and the designing process. And focus on, growing a family, had 2 kids, and that's kind of where my life has been. Regarding percussion, I've actually started working with Pulse Percussion in 2012, just as a visual technician or visual caption head type. And then I kind of started getting involved more and more as the years went on in the design part of things. And again, right around the same time, 2015, which was when, I had to start doing a little bit less time on the road or in person doing the teaching. And so, I had to limit my time and in person just so that I could spend more time at home and raising my kids and that kind of thing. So, but beyond that, it's just been kind of drill designer by trade since I was barely graduating high school. So I got a really early start, and my work was always over the top of my head, and I had to learn the hard way. I didn't really have too many people initially to kind of teach me the way, so I had to figure it out as I went. And so now here we are, many years down the road, as a designer, as a creative, the kind of person that just kind of puts full packages together. And so that's kind of my involvement in drum corps and in percussion.
Yeah, that's awesome. Originally, you are not a percussionist, correct?
I am not. I'm a horn player. I'm a baritone player is what I marched what I played when I marched.
Okay. And are you from Southern California originally?
Born and raised, yeah. So I was born in Huntington Park.
Okay.
And then I grew up in the LA Orange County area, attended school, went to college here in Orange County, and just kind of living here ever since.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, a lot of band there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good programs, and so it kind of puts you in a position to blossom, to grow as quickly as you see fit, as you drive yourself to grow. So I had opportunities. I was in the right place at the right time many times, and so that's just kind of what led me to the exponential growth. Thankfully, I'm very
Yeah.
fortunate to have those experiences.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, Matt.
Well, I'm from Virginia, originally, and Salem, Virginia. There's a drum corps show there. So anyone that knows that, it's the dog show, the little dogs that are like beside your warm up spot every year. Um, so then I marched Capital Regiment after my senior year. Not a lot of people know that. I don't really talk about that one. That was a rough summer at Capital Regiment. My
What
first
year was that?
2004. So yeah,
Was Wayne Dillon the brass caption
yeah,
head?
yeah, he was there,
Nice.
and Thad Pence. It was just Capital Regiment as an organization was hard for me to go to transition to, like, just straight out of high school. I didn't really know a lot or outside or worldly cultures or experiences. It was a kind of a culture shock in general of everything. And then I marched Cavaliers after that for 4 years, and then aged out in 2008, and I played 2 years of baritone. Well, I held the baritone and I played a little bit, and then I played the tuba, or I held the tuba for 2 more years after that. So on the holds, I would usually play, but I was always more of a marching visual person, and I played when I could. So I did 2 years of baritone, 2 years of tuba, and I took 2009 off. That was my first year doing nothing, and I've been at Vanguard since 2010, starting as a visual technician, and 2017 was my first year as visual caption manager and staff coordinator. So I've done that for the past 3 years. I guess I don't really count this past summer. So yeah, 17, 18, 19. And I started designing for Vanguard Cadets, the open class group, in 2018 and 2019. And then for indoor, it's actually how I got my start with designing. I didn't really start writing for marching band and drum corps until I'd moved to California. When I was in Virginia, I was doing a lot more indoor, working with George Mason, living in Richmond, working with some high schools around there. So that's kind of where I got my start. And then once I moved to California, I marched with him at Cavaliers, and he was kind of the first person that was like, dude, you should just write drill. Like, it's gonna be great. You're gonna love the lifestyle, the job, the pay. You're gonna like everything about it. And I wasn't really doing that. I was just kind of in the trenches of teaching as a tech kind of thing. So in Virginia, where it's not as well funded for teaching, right? So I was just kind of in that rut, if you will, of like, I don't really know what I'm doing kind of thing. And then so he kind of like was like, you just have to write drill. So as soon as I moved here in 2012, I think, is when I started just kind of full out. I was just like, this is what I'm going to do. Took the leap of faith, and I'm pretty lucky and happy with that choice. And I started teaching at Pulse Percussion as the visual caption manager in 2017, and just kind of helping facilitate staffing and rehearsals, running any rehearsal or educational philosophies, pedagogies, kind of things to just kind of maximize our efficiency at both. That's kind of my I guess I'll call it specialty, but I really enjoy that. That's like, I love teaching and working with other teachers and maximizing their time on the field or the floor. So that's kind of what I've been doing the past 3 years with both organizations since 2017. And I design for marching bands and indoor drum lines as well throughout the year. So we both have a pretty parallel work track as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, both of you guys stay pretty busy, it sounds like.
Yeah, I like to travel a lot in the fall. Like, we would just joke sometimes before COVID, like I would spend 5 days in California and pretty much the rest in Texas. And it's like that I don't know how long that's gonna happen or how long I'm gonna be allowed to do that. But I take advantage of it while we can, and we both love to work, and that grind of of going above and beyond for the community, the performers, the directors, everybody. That's kind of stuff that we really enjoy. So we have to sometimes remind ourselves to like not work all the time.
Yeah, getting those calls from those directors at 2 a.m, getting ready for the regional the next day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely miss all the travel and everything. I mean, I know Matt, we've spent some time together in Long Beach, having some great meals together the past few years, and it's
Yeah.
been quite a bummer to not be able to have that experience. Although I did make it to California once or twice this year, so it seems
Yeah,
like that'll probably
I
be
think
it.
we're gonna go have some poke nachos in your name later and watch
Ooh.
the sunset together. It'll be nice, huh?
Well, I'm very jealous. They did so in Nashville. We did just recently start to get poke bowl
Oh,
places, but of course, it's nothing like Row over there on Second Avenue. So,
yeah.
you know, one day I'll make it back out there. So cool. Well, let's jump into a little bit of talk about what you guys do at Pulse Percussion, and just kind of give us like an overview. I know, obviously you guys are both there. John and Ian are there. John Mapes and Ian Grom are doing music design and maybe some visual design also. But just give us like an overview of what the team is like, how it's structured, and maybe how that team came to be.
Well, at Pulse Percussion, it's really interesting how we all collaborate. So it starts with 4 people on the design team. Like you mentioned, Ian Grom is a front ensemble ranger, electronics guy. And John serves more of like a program coordinator and visual coordinator. He does a lot of the drill as well. Him and I really collaborate on the visual side to develop everything from, maybe at some moment he has a big picture idea and doesn't really we don't really know how to get it to be. And so I can come in, I'm kind of like the mechanic, I'm working with the nuts and bolts and making sure pathways work and things are fluid. And then we also have Rochelle Mapes, who is a big choreographer for us and really not just a choreographer, but also has a really strong vision for the overall effect of everything. So there's not really many decisions that any one person in particular makes without the consent of others, or at least working and collaborating with others. And so that kind of makes it a really unique environment in which we don't have our individual roles and specialties pretty much ever. There's times where Ian Grom takes some information from John Mapes in terms of the music pacing and things being too long and being too short. There's times that, John has ideas about choreography and the choreographer has thoughts about this. And so everyone's kind of constantly moving and shifting. And the funny thing is that there's every year that we don't necessarily have the same role year in, year out, Like I mentioned earlier, there was a year I was having a child. I was having one of my kids, and so that kind of took me out of the process a little bit. And so everyone collaborated to fill in that little gap and that void. And so, in terms of being collaborative, the process normally starts with the 4 of us sitting in a room, whether it's kind of informal and casual. We don't like to put too much pressure on the design side of things, but John really is, the idea guy. So conceptually, he kind of throws together what his thoughts are and his overall vision. And we kind of talk about it. We chew on things, we chew on ideas, and nothing is set in stone until you watch it at finals. We're constantly shifting, adjusting. It's a very, very evolving process at all times. And, we used to really focus on making sure that we had the entire show fleshed out, from first note to last note, from first drill move to last drill move. And we just found that we not painted ourselves into a corner, but we limited ourselves in how creative and expressive and emotional we could be within the design. So we've kind of allowed ourselves to work in those different ways where, oftentimes, as a matter of fact, there's times where John has a lot of visual components, doesn't know exactly how they fit. And, and something that I enjoy doing, surprisingly enough, is showing up to rehearsal somewhat with an open canvas, like I don't have anything really mapped out or figured out. And we really work to, in a live setting, create the most fluid design possible that achieves all the check marks that John has kind of coordinated into the show. And so from a visual perspective, that's kind of how we operate. And then the team came to be, this particular team came to be, when I became a part of the Pulse organization, it was in 2012, and it was mid-season. I didn't really have too many connections with the percussion world. Again, I'm a horn player, so I didn't really know the people, the players. And I was working at a high school. I was working at Chino Hills High School, and I was working at Los Alamitos High School. And at the time, some of the percussion techs, the battery techs, were working at those schools with me. And I was also working as the visual caption head at the Cavaliers those years. And so just kind of like through word of mouth, John found out that, his battery staff was working with the caption head at the Cavaliers, and he finally gave me a call. We kind of talked a little bit about having me come out, and I came out to rehearsal. It was a quick development into a working relationship where he trusts me, I trust him, and now we're sitting here today, where there's very few times where he designed something without me, or I designed something without him. We just constantly in communication and balancing all of those visual ideas out with one another. So to say that there's a system that works for us, that system would probably be just a fluid collaboration between all parts. No one has a label, no one sticks to just what they do. There's constantly communication. I think that's really key to having a really successful team when it comes to the creative process. There's people who are really, really creative and can do it all themselves. I will say that that's quite a bit of work. I applaud those people who can do that. But for us at Pulse, it's definitely much more pliable and much more flexible in terms of who has roles, and we hate to label it and pin it down. So in a lot of programs, the band director, the visual designer, and maybe the music arranger and the color guard person can all collaborate and mix and match ideas. And it's hard to say that none of those ideas work or all of those ideas work from any individual person. It's really good to have a collaboration between all parts. You'll find really good ideas in the strangest places at times. So
absolutely. Yeah, we've seen that all over in the marching arts, the past 10 years or so, just random ideas. Were you at Cavs in 2011?
Yeah, that was my first year as the visual caption head there.
Okay, yeah, Jack Hallway, who taught the tenors that year, I think he still does teach the tenors there.
Yeah.
He told me about how all of the upside down stuff kind of came to be, and it was really just kind of a joke that they were playing during early drumline move-ins about how they were getting things done. And then Mac saw it, and he was just like, "Actually, let's maybe give that a shot." And then
that was certainly by accident, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. There's inspiration from all over the place. So I think the guys were messing around one day and just goofing off, and I think someone caught a video of it and sent it off. Maybe Max saw it and sent it off to Michael Gaines, and he said, "Let's put it in." And so it would just quickly became this conversation, and we try to implement it in other parts of the show so that it was kind of like a recurring theme. So very, very unique ideas can come from the strangest places for sure.
Yeah, that's that's pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you joined Pulse in 2012 mid-season. They had just come off of winning their first championship in 2010, then being a perennial championship contender. After that, you're coming from a horn background, not really plugged into the percussion community. What's that experience like for you to jump on board of a championship contending team like that?
Yeah, I think, well, like I said, my background was very my development was very accelerated in terms of the learning curve being really steep, kind of for my first 5 years. It always felt like I was in under my head for sure.
Mm-hmm.
that didn't stop me from grinding it out and trying to figure out how to keep up with what was happening, you know. And so I think the thing that really helped was not only that, you know, I was very pliable with, you know, how to do things. I was also very willing to offer a different opinion or a different perspective, one that might not be um, too normal within the percussion world, you know. And
Yeah.
from what I recognized, generally speaking, a lot of percussion, like caption heads or you know, percussion directors, they at the time they also wrote the drill and wrote the beats and wrote the show, and they did everything. So I think when I entered that conversation, it was a welcome change where it kind of relieved a little bit of the stress on the individuals to come up with all of the ideas. And it really became this dialogue, this kind of like dance of like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And we were able to get through material faster and make decisions a little bit better. Um, but for me, you know, it was the first few years. Truthfully, it was a lot of catching up and trying to figure out, trying to get my hand on the pulse of the activity. No pun intended. But it was really just kind of trying to identify what things were successful, what things were not successful, what is being looked at, what is being valued, what is being scored positively. And so with that, you know, again, I had already been on this accelerated, like, learn quickly path. And so I was able to just maneuver my way through that environment and hope and, you know, ultimately be successful and be somewhat a contributor on the team with that regard. So definitely it was a learning curve, a steep learning curve, but, you know, ultimately it felt like it was a place that I thrived and I enjoyed being a part of, simply because of the challenge. I think, you know,
Yeah.
it was like, you know, fight or flight. And so it was it was definitely a welcome change and challenge for me.
Yeah, and I definitely attribute a lot of the growth that's happened in indoor percussion activity the past 10 years or so, or even maybe going back as far as like 2007, 2008, I think can be attributed to you guys, like visual people getting more involved. So it's not just drum guys doing drum body and shows about zombies and nightmares and things like
Yeah.
that, but also, you know, having someone like Rochelle on the staff
Right.
and, you know, having more of that influx from the dance world or the color guard side of things, you know, really opens up the palette a lot more in terms of what the performers are able to do, you know, because it's not just, you know, the same 4 or 5 body moves that you see that, you know, accentuate rim shots and stuff like that.
Right. Right.
But it just totally changes the game in terms of the styles of shows that can be presented.
Yeah,
So I think it's really neat.
I think definitely when Rochelle actually joined the Pulse visual team either the year before me or the same year as me, so either 11 or 12. And, you know, the flavors of visual motion and movement that she brings to the table were definitely something that hadn't been seen, that I hadn't seen in percussion in ever really. And so she definitely influenced the stylistic design choices that we kind of pursued. Um, and, you know, and she's super creative and super um, detail oriented with the way she comes to the organization and to the members. And we quickly learned that we had, you know, a Ferrari in terms of the members.
Yeah.
They could do anything. You know, we would ask them to do some obscure visual motion and movement, and they were able to handle it. And so when we learned that, we were just every year we were trying to kind of outdo what we had done, and it's certainly a style that sets us apart. It feels like, you know, and the members just they eat it up and they love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Matt, how does your role fit in with everything at Pulse?
So I do a lot of stuff that he doesn't do. So he is all heads in on design, and then he'll come in and clean a little bit. So then that's kind of a little bit more in my world. I'm the visual caption manager and staff coordinator. So I spend a lot of time before rehearsal making sure that the weekend is going to be organized, and we communicate that to the staff and the members and the directors and ask questions, problem solve. My philosophy in that role is to answer questions before they're asked. So I want everyone to know the answer. So when they come and ask the question, I say, check the group me, it's on there. I want to try my best to make sure that, we have as much figured out so everyone feels confident, knows what they're doing, and is efficient with their time so that we can maximize the product and the experience. So that's kind of the pre-week, like pre-Friday night conversations that I'll have with mainly John Mapes, and I will talk about that. I'm like, hey, what does the design need? And then, okay, so here's what the ensemble needs based off of that. So, the design team, they like to tweak the product, as Steven said, till finals. So every Friday night is our Viz night. So we go 7:30 to midnight on Fridays, and that's all Viz. We don't play on Fridays. And that's usually John, Steven, and when Rochelle is needed, like when there's a heavy choreo moment or when they're ready for that, she'll come in. But she's there quite often in the beginning part. And it's just them plugging away at the show. And, myself and other Viz techs are just kind of, if they wrote something for the snares and they went over there and they're like doing the next 32 counts for the bass drums, then we'll rep what the snares are doing. Or we just want to make sure no one's sitting around. We're maximizing our time. We're detailing it. Because another thing is, like, they don't have to really detail it. They can kind of get the motion right. And then we can go in and just like define it to the grid and define the little shapes and nuances of the details. So they can just be kind of close, they'll get it really close, and then we'll just pick it to pieces kind of as a tech. So that's kind of our Friday night process. Saturday, they usually spend the morning doing subs. Afternoon, we call beats to feats, which is basically like marching and playing set to set on the floor. And then Saturday night is an ensemble or music focus. And then Sunday morning is usually music only time. And then Sunday afternoon is usually an ensemble. So unless we have a show, that kind of just, that's a different kind of weekend. So just kind of figuring out what the ensemble needs, talking with John and other designers. If something was bad in the show the week before, then maybe we do need a little bit more ensemble with the Met to get it to hold tempo. So that's kind of, we just basically dissect, and John is usually great with all that. Like he knows exactly what the ensemble needs from a design or educational side. So my job is just to deliver that. So the techs aren't like after lunch on a Saturday, they're like, what's happening? The goal is that every person knows exactly what's going on before they show up for the whole weekend. And they're not like practicing different parts of the show on music block time. So I'll coordinate. Snares are on a sub grid, like a little baby grid, doing the snare solo. So we do a lot of the solos in the morning and just like make those exposed moments really clear on the move with the snare tech or their tech. So I'll schedule those as well. First hour is going to be snares. Second hour will be the bass drum working the closer section. So it's just a really detailed flow of the weekend.
Yeah.
And other facility questions. Usually we're at the same place, but what other, kind of the band director-ish kind of questions. The directors do all the other like show and props and things like that. But when it comes to the membership, I also, have taken a lot of interest in just finding efficiency within our rehearsal etiquette and how we practice the discipline. And I think the most important thing is culture. And I think that I'm a firm believer in we teach marching band or drum corps or indoor drumline as a vehicle to create good humans for the future. So, we talk a lot about that, and we talk a lot about how we treat our facility, our equipment, each other, people around us. And 2020 was an incredibly special year for Pulse. Not just like the show or the quality, like that was we were still really happy with that, but the cast, like the members, that was something completely different. And when you teach for a while, like the ones that really click, and that was really special because the culture was finally, I think we're really starting to reap the rewards of what we've been investing in, is not just great shows, but that we are also changing lives in this idiom as well. And that the people that we have there and the section leaders, they were fantastic at just, it was beyond 100% buy-in and discipline and commitment to each other and their craft. And it was something really special. So that's something that I take a lot of pride in and really focus on and make sure that it's a positive experience for everyone. I want the techs, I want the designers, I want the directors, I want the board, I want the members to have great surveys at the end of the year. Like, I felt that I'm valued as a person and a performer. And so I take a lot of pride in that and try to talk with section leaders or staff or designers and say, hey, how can we make this better? Problem solving 101 and communication, making sure that I send pictures to the broken prop to the director so they can schedule to fix it so we can actually have ensemble. Because if that prop's not in, we're not practicing. So those are pretty, mundane tasks, but they're critical to, I think, to the success of the overall thing that people see on Saturday night or on a DVD. That there's a lot of work behind the scenes in that regard. So I enjoy that. That's kind of that's my job at Pulse and has been for the past few years.
Yeah, and I think that's such a smart idea to have someone that really takes ownership over all of that aspect of an organization. I mean, especially when you're dealing with an independent organization where rehearsal time is going to be so limited and every moment that you have to work on something is precious. So that way you don't get to after that Saturday night performance and be like, man, if we just had that 15 minutes more in February, that we didn't have because this transition didn't work to get to the ensemble on time, we maybe could have gotten it. And it's really neat to do that. I'd also encourage like scholastic groups, sometimes, if your head director is in charge of the group, it might be a little bit difficult to get a pulse of what some of the kids are feeling like, because maybe they just don't want to open up to the director, or they're a little bit nervous to really convey or communicate what is actually the vibe of the group. So, having someone that's a little bit more of a senior member of the staff, but not, the director, so to speak, would be a good person to kind of be that vibe check for the group, and also maybe helps them to set that standard a little bit easier, because it's, just a little bit more of an open line of communication, as opposed to a director just saying, hey, we're going to rehearse like this because that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I'm thinking about it, there are several people that are involved in building that culture. And John texts we all have a group meet with section leaders and things like that. But I kind of look at it in a theater standpoint as a stage manager.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of help facilitate, make sure the track is perfect. That the designers, they make the show and leave it with you to make the show come to life. That's kind of a responsibility, but it's also making sure that the truck gets locked, kind of thing. So it's like. Yeah. It's a little bit of that whole world of a little bit of everything, but my main job is to make sure that the visual program is great, and then leading ensemble on like Saturday nights or Sundays, and working with the main music person so that we both have that dialogue, so that the ensemble knows where to look and what to listen to when we're in rehearsal. So,
yeah, that's great. Now, you mentioned Friday night time where they're doing, maybe some visual design, staging some moments. Just from a process standpoint, do you guys generally design everything out in Pieware, give the kids a coordinate sheet, and then they figure that out and you kind of fill in the production from there? Or is it more on the fly, you have an idea for staging and you kind of workshop it?
Yeah, well, we definitely don't do anything on Pieware. I'll start with saying that. And not that there's nothing wrong with it. And as a designer, I provide a lot of drill to a lot of clients across the country through Pieware. And fortunately, I've been able to make it as fluid and at least seemingly organic as being there in person. So there is some technique and skill that is required to be able to do that. That being said, with Pulse in particular, again, it's different every single weekend almost. So the typical week in terms of leading up to a Friday night is John and I will probably have a conversation early in the week about here's the goals for the weekend. We got to get to rehearsal letter C by Friday night so that they can ensemble it and rehearse it all weekend. Okay, that's the challenge. Then we talk on Wednesday about what are the key points that we're trying to do? Where do we need to see the focus? Who's playing? What do those things look like? And what major ideas are we trying to communicate? So we'll sketch things out on paper, literal drawings. And just like, we want to shift the props over here to side 2, and then we want to get the snares over on side 1. And so those are the broad brush strokes. And then John spends some time with it, I wouldn't say mapping every single count out, but he definitely hits some major landmarks for us. Mm-hmm. Most of the time it has no detailed like positions. It's not like snare 1 goes to snare 1 spot, snare 2 goes to snare 2 spot, with the exception maybe the bass drums, we'll keep them in order. But even sometimes then we're like scrambling them up. Then once we get to those landmarks might be spaced out by 15 seconds of material or music, and we don't really know the exact drill forms that are going to move from that first spot to the last spot, but we know we want to start here and we know we want to end here. So by the time it's Friday night, 7:30 p.m., we pull out the floor, get the kids gathered around, and we start talking to them about what our goals are. And normally they're really good about allowing and helping us and motivating us to kind of get through the workload for that night. Mm-hmm. But then it's real broad strokes. It's real broad strokes. Okay, snares, can we all stand here? This is the thing that I'm thinking about. We stand back, we take a look at it. This looks a lot bigger than I thought. Get a little closer, get a little further, whatever the case may be, adjust. And then we kind of work our way towards that arrival point or that next next landmark that we're trying to work towards. If it's around the beginning of the show, oftentimes we'll work backwards. We know we want to start with some movement or whatever we have programmed into the show, but we know we need to pick the drums up here or something like that.
Yeah.
So we'll start there, and then we'll just disassemble the whole thing from that point out to the beginning. And if you saw the 2019 production, maybe it's 2020 production. We're in 2020, right? This past year, yeah.
Yeah.
The COVID, the quarantine thing, and I don't know what year it is anymore. But our 2020 production had it was very heavily involving props, these large 6-foot round pie slices that would elevate and drop down, and they took a huge footprint out of the show. So in order to go in and map that all out on Pieware, we felt it was maybe a little easier to manipulate them in person so we can see the actual weight of the prop. Mm-hmm. In person. When you're just looking at a Pieware screen or just a piece of paper, it doesn't have the same volume or the mass that is that you would tell when you're seeing a person standing next to it. So with regards to that, we started off in this kind of open-ended set, and then we got to this arrival point, and we kind of just little by little filtered out, like, let you guys switch props, you guys go back that way, let's move the prop 3 inches this way, set this up back there. And then you also have to have the foresight to include additional props later down the show. Yeah. So we also had like a secondary prop and a tertiary prop and all these layers that we were, how they interacted. We had these poles with a spinning ball on top of them, and we would later detach them and place them into the props that we had used initially. So it's very involved. And so with all of those elements, you have to kind of start with everything out there. You have to see how each one is going to affect the other. And then it's just a sequence of adjustments, and you constantly tinker with like your pathways. Hey, it's easier if you go around this way, and it's easier if you go around that way. Hey, you 2 snares, you guys have to switch. And so all of that happens on Friday night. It's usually outside in the blacktop, with the lights. If the gym is available, we obviously do it inside the gym. But there's just a lot of tinkering. And we like to get an early start within the season, just so that all that tinkering, all that, the maneuvering of all the small changes gets ironed out well before we're into the throes of the season. And that allows us also to take our time on the design, get it right. Oftentimes, if you do something on Pieware, it feels like that's it. That's what it has to be.
Yeah.
And if you're standing in rehearsal and I'm looking at this drill set, I set the drill set, moving on. And you can kind of get through a lot of charts that way. But we like to make sure it's right. We like to tweak it without being too set on this person has to be here. There's a very few times where certain people have to absolutely be there, and then you build the whole design off of that. So Again, like I said earlier, it's a pliable experience with working with the pieces, but it's definitely opened my eyes to the way I look at design. Pieware feels not more rigid, but a little less flexible in terms of the changes you can make, unless you're the one that's actually there adjusting it as you teach your Pieware charts. Whereas this process for us, again, it's all about big picture down to the details. And so as the weekend goes on, we're talking broad strokes Friday night, and we're talking the tiniest little eraser mark and little pencil finishing touches by the end of the weekend. And so we like to do it that way, just so that it all kind of focuses in as the weekend goes on.
Yeah, that's so neat to me. And I mean, like I, come from the music side of the house. I was in the front ensemble when I marched in drum corps and at Rhythm X and indoor drumline. So my visual skills or visual know-how might be a little bit limited, you
Sure.
might say. Michael Gaines would probably give me some words for being a little more than 7 feet out on the field in drum corps 2019, but that's just how it goes sometimes.
Yeah.
I do my best, but my step size might not be that great.
You're like, I took 4 steps. They were just big. You said 4 steps. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's really all I can do, But it's always blown my mind. Like, my first real big design gig was working for Palmetto Percussion, writing the front ensemble book for them. That's a long time ago now, but I want to say like the first drill sets that we always kind of wrote, quote unquote, for the seasons they were like always on napkins and just like super informal, just like ideas. And then we would get to rehearsal and they would all of a sudden just be able to do it and put it together. And it always just really impressed me because, as a music composer or arranger, I would like never be able to do that. It's always, and maybe that's just me, like as a very analytical person, but it's like, I always need to have it like good to go, ready, and then hand it off to the kids so then they can prepare it and then play. Like I can probably count, 5 to 10 times total over the past 15 years where I've had to like teach by rote or like compose things in the moment. And usually it's like transitional ideas or making small little changes on the fly. But it just blows my mind that like you guys can produce what you can by just like trial and error and just, having lab time basically.
Yeah, it's crazy. I used to be much like you, very analytical with how I saw design. The pieces needed to fit. It needed to be composed in a way that already worked. And not that I still see things that way as well, but now I'm able to see that in real time and seeing, when we're sitting here and we're trying to figure out this small transition, and you start to visualize pathways, and oftentimes, I would say that in the John and myself duo, I'm the one that's able to imagine those pathways a little bit with a little bit more efficiency than he is. So he just like literally goes, "Hey, just do that. I'm gonna go over here. Let me know when you got something." And so I'll like play with them pathways, and sometimes I build certain motion one person at a time. Like, hey, you snare 5, you go that way. Hey, snare 4, now you go around him. Hey, snare 3, you go between them. Hey, snare 2, you go around the other way. And then when we kind of put it all together, everyone run that little chunk. Everyone's kind of weaving within each other. And I attribute that to my very first experience writing drill. I was 18, 17, maybe. I showed up to my very first small high school, 36 wins. There was no pressure. I showed up day one with my drill charts on Pieware, and I said, "Hey, here's standing this set," and then we set page 2, and then we went to rehearse it, and everyone crashed into each other. And at that moment, I realized I have to think about where they're going, not just the cool picture that they're in. And so, that was I went home, rewrote everything real quick, and brought it back the next day, and it worked. But that thought process, that ability to see the pathways, is something that takes a lot of time to develop. And so now I kind of walk into any rehearsal fearless with like, I know I can make it work if I'm just given a little bit of time to push the pieces around. So there is some, for me, there's a little bit of confidence in walking into this. It kind of makes me feel comfortable. walking into a situation where I'm not really sure how it's going to work out, but we're going to get something out of it, you know?
Yeah, that's a pretty rapid departure from a couple of guys that were in March Your Dot Cavaliers shows for so long.
Well, I still appreciate that as well, you know?
It's funny because I have the exact same story in Virginia, where my first time writing drill, and the first set I remember it was a drum line, and I knew that drummers needed to be a certain interval, but I had them at a 1-step block, a 1x1 with drums on, and I give them their coordinate cards and they go out
Pretty
there
tight.
because I'd wrote it on Pieware, and they kind of all get up and they're like, Mr. Hartwell, we can't fit in here with our, the bass 5 is like, I'm having some problems. And I'm like, and I look back there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I am going to have to redo all this. Like, all the students are sitting there staring at me, and I just didn't think about it really, how it all needed to work. And I wrote the whole opener. And so I just had to say, all right, set up what I wrote for page 2. I'll just fix it. I'll fix it. And then I would just do it on the fly and say, that's really what I wanted. Why didn't I think that space is what I needed on Pieware? And I didn't really put that together. And this was after I'd marched Cavaliers, where I should have known that, or probably did know that. I don't know. Or all I care about is my dot, maybe. So I didn't know how they relate to each other.
Well, from what I've learned about the spin cycle show, it was that you didn't have to really think about pathways because you just made every 4 or 2 counts a subset, right?
Yeah.
7 million drill pages.
Yeah, they probably had like 240 just regular sets, but then everything.
240x.
Yeah. So yeah, I have the same experience as him, where I was just like, oh wow, Pieware, I messed this all up. I have to redo this on the fly. And working with them at Pulse has really helped me understand design differently as well, and just seeing how they craft things in person and how you can write things on Pieware differently. And I now understand that when people say that looks like Pieware, and how you can make it look and feel differently but still use Pieware, and how you can manipulate every single person's pathway basically. So instead of writing a drill move for the snares, you write a drill move for each person. And that kind of concept can be parallel in how you're starting to challenge yourself from a design perspective to not make it feel like what I used to do on Pieware as a designer, that made it look a little bit more like marching band drill or drill related, and more of motion and textures, and how you can stage moments differently. And that gives you more variety of tools to use. So just being a part of that process and helping and moving out here, a lot of groups do that. So that's really kind of opened my eyes to have tons of different ways to do it, to pull from, where you need some traditional type drill elements and maybe some are just a little bit more free. So yeah, that's definitely, and when you described it, you said like the Pieware version, or the just kind of go, try it out, that one's definitely a little bit more up our alley. But they do have John has a notebook full of like ideas that they do earlier in the week, but not every single idea is all the way fleshed out. But what's interesting is that a lot of the music is designed to some of the events, right? So John takes a programming role, and in 2019, when we had the 6 tables, like there were 6 slams built into the music in like November. And that was because they knew the tables were going to lock together these 6 times. So like when we staged that in January, it was already planned in November. So a lot of the times the stuff goes really quick for them when they put that forefront time in the beginning of like November, just to like really figure out every vertical effect or transition. Then it's just like they can get on a grind. They can just go really fast.
Yeah, and already kind of building in that cohesiveness into the total.
Yeah, it's already been typed out in Word per se, and they're just basically putting it on the floor. And then there's moments where they're like, we kind of know what we want with this, and we know that it could take us a couple months to really figure it out. Like last year's intro, we would have full Friday nights doing 32 counts. It's kind of like, we just really need to just keep messing with it. And that's kind of an all hands on deck. So it is cool how nothing is exactly the same. Some of it is a lab, and some of it is just like, boom, we're just plowing through 64 counts in like 10 minutes because they know exactly what they want. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to see a little bit of everything, in the process.
Yeah, that's great. So that's kind of the process that you guys use for, Pulse, which is like ultra high level independent world group. Now, Stephen, I know you work at Chino Hills as well, but how would you maybe apply these same concepts or apply them differently to an A or an open class group?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I think I apply with A and open class groups is that there's multiple ways to create the same effect, I think the biggest thing is that when you fall in love with an idea, that can sometimes be your Achilles heel. Not to say that it's not a good idea, but you start to force all of the ideas into supporting this one overall idea. And I see a lot of people struggle with being insistent that it has to work that way. The best analogy I can provide is that 3 + 3 = 6, but so does 2 + 4, so does 1 + 5. And so when you start to look at it from a different perspective and start to develop the idea from a different angle or a different way or a different side of the floor, you start to notice that you open yourself up to tons of opportunities and tons of options for the same effect. My biggest fear is when I hear a band director say, I've always wanted to do a show about, that means two things to me. Number one, I am not going to bring this idea to fruition because it's inside of your head.
Yep.
And then number two, we're going to have a tough time trying to make all of those ideas fit when you have a finite amount of counts. And so when I really think about A and open class groups, I use a lot of the same principles of design in those groups, but I just make sure that the skill sets are appropriate for that class. So where you might see a drill move with a spin and some technical music and some choreography towards the end of the phrase at a very fast tempo or a very dynamic range of technical skill sets, that's where the world class lives. Well, you can still do the spin, you can still do the move, and you can still play the technical piece, but just pull them apart. So you have the spin independent from the move, independent from the technical phrase. And you just kind of, I don't want to say dilute because that makes it sound like you cheapen the experience for a performer in A or open. I think there's ways you can challenge those performers. You just have to make sure that it's the level, the layers of skill sets, limit that so that you can still have a very diverse product without, pushing the envelope too far. With regards to, from a design perspective, with regards to, being in love with an idea, the moment you fall in love with an idea, I've had some really, really good ideas that don't make the cut, and I've also had a very small, strange, accidental idea that ends up being the marquee moment of the show, and so when you look at it that way, you start to realize that, you'll be surprised when you step back from, this ownership and this like control of the program and what it's supposed to be, and allow it to evolve freely. And it's an iterative process. You kind of learn about the show as you're putting it together. And I think that is what would be most effective in A class and open class. If you just kind of strip down the expectations as it has to be this and allow it to take shape, use your performers as a barometer for what strengths they have, what weaknesses they have, and kind of steer away from the weaknesses and focus on those strengths so that you can get the most out of your performers. But in a lot of ways, I don't change the way I design for an A class or an open class group. I just make sure I don't layer all of the responsibilities the same way I would at Pulse.
Yeah. And that's so important. I mean, as a judge, I see that very frequently now. It's usually through a musical lens, but the layering of the responsibilities is still evident. And you can tell a very distinct difference between a performer that is truly able to embody the character of their show and everything that they're supposed to communicate to the audience, and performers that have that capability, but because of the demand that's been placed upon them, oftentimes in compounded responsibilities, they're not able to effectively communicate that moment to the audience. So from an effects standpoint, you're not going to have that connection. From a musical standpoint, they're not going to be able to blend as well. From a visual standpoint, they might not physically be able to march as well as you want. So it's just like, get rid of one or two of those things, figure out what the most important one is, and just do it really well.
Right, right. Yeah, when I used to spend a lot more time teaching, I would think about digestible pieces of information. So when I would talk to an A class student, trying to get them to learn something that's above their skill set, perhaps, maybe just a little bit above their skill set, I would think about like the lowest nugget of information that I can give them to get them one step closer to that skill. And as I went on and I just kind of and making sure every single sentence that I taught was a digestible chunk of information. When you compile all of that in a string or like a sequence, you start to see that they understand this skill and this skill and this skill, maybe independently, but you still get credit for demonstrating each skill. Whereas
Absolutely.
maybe the world-class performer would be able to compile all three of those skills in a digestible way and show you that they understand it. So I think the biggest mistake I would say that people make in the designing A and open might be that they try to give the kids too much. And sometimes you don't need to make it, if you're in an open class, you don't need to make it low world. You just need to make it good open. And understanding that difference is really important to being successful, competitively speaking.
Yeah, if I can chime in, that
Yeah.
I think with experience, you learn what those skills are. So that's another thing that a lot of when I was teaching an open only, I didn't have the experience to understand the demand of releasing the spine, or like the nuance of facial expression to portray an effect. Like that, people think of those shows often, like our clients will come to us with like a storytelling or an emotional show, and that's a really tough thing to portray or teach students. That's if you're in an A class level. So we want to think about, I had to, through years of teaching, you learn that, well, clean and effective and great design is going to be what you want to go for. And that if the students or the ensemble isn't set up well for higher level responsibilities, even in isolation, even if we take these simultaneous responsibilities and pull them out, it's hard to release your spine and to have that kind of dance nuance or movement style in the program. So understanding which one of those skills dissected is obtainable for your students is also kind of tough. And a lot of people, even in isolation, and I have learned this through failure, of it's an isolated effect that's not, 3 layers on top of each other to make it this rich world-class kind of level. But I tried to do some of that in my younger years without really knowing the complexity of that one thing. Maybe I saw it on a YouTube channel or was inspired by another video, but I didn't understand the complexities of getting it to be the best, regardless of how hard it is. And I think knowing and having some mentorship or someone to help you that says that's a really hard skill to get to play clean or to emote or to march or to dance, and learning the power of no can really help kind of A or open programs. And that's something that I was thankful to have some of those mentors kind of say, like, why are you doing that? That's really challenging or really hard, and you're teaching an A-class program. I'm like, well, I think it's fitting. And it's like, well, it could be this, and it's and then the kids are just clean automatically, and it goes to the same effect. So like, I went from 3+3 to 1+5 and got the same thing and just made it really simple, and it works. So I think understanding what type of skills for A and open will really help. And the process, I write for some opens and A's as well. And the process is still the same. You're still communicating, and every group has a different way of designing a show. It's just that, you have to know what class you're writing for. And I've written for A class groups that get bumped to open, and it's like, I wrote it for A and it gets bumped to open, or I wrote it for open and it gets bumped to world. So that certainly happens. And you have to be ready to know how to do that. And it's a tough thing to write, to nail it down as A only. You did a spin while marching at a higher tempo, and you also played. So you made that choice, and that's an open class, world-class skill.
Yeah.
So, just knowing, I still struggle with that, knowing it's like, no, Matt, you can't ask that, even though it looks cool and it fits and it's all great. It's like, you have to tell yourself, no, this needs to be successful and keep it smart.
Yeah.
So it's something we're all still kind of trying to figure out, like, hey, is this too hard? We send each other videos like of our drill and we're like, is this kind of crazy? Is this cool? Is it going to be easy to teach? These are all things that we want to make sure we don't over or under target that.
The famous question of what is a basic skill set?
Right.
Yeah.
Who knows at this point?
We'll let
the
steering committee answer that one. So
that's right. We need John on here to be able to answer that question. John and Caleb.
Yeah, I feel like they'll both be like, oof, all right, here we go. It depends on what color of gray you like, because it's not black or white. It's just kind of in there, like how you all feel it. So
exactly. And Matt, I think you've done a really good job of towing that line between A and Open. I'm struggling to remember the name of the school that you wrote for. It was the 1,000 Cranes or 100 Cranes show.
Yeah.
In St. Louis area, right?
Yeah, Belleville East. Yeah,
Belleville.
That one we wrote for A, and it got bumped to Open, and it made Open finals. But we definitely were all in on A when we wrote it, and we just realized it just kind of happened that there was a sophistication. We didn't plan the show a certain way. It was pretty simple when we planned it, but when it came to life, there was a sophistication in some of it, and some emotional elements, and some depth to some of the vertical moments that lended it to feel natural in open class.
Yeah.
And obviously teaching and performing can, at a high level, and understanding those higher level skills kind of brought it to life and made it convincing for that class. So yeah, that was definitely, and that was recent. So that's still a learning experience after, a decade of doing it. I'm always a student of the craft of like trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. And I definitely encourage anyone, if you can find that show, I don't know if it's on YouTube or wherever you can legally view WGI videos. I don't even know they put out DVDs or Blu-rays anymore. Betamax tapes. But yeah, definitely check that show out. I mean, like you said, is super clear. If I'm recalling correctly, the overarching theme of the show was it went from either light to dark, maybe back to light, or vice versa, something like that.
Yeah, it was light to dark. It was 1,000 paper cranes, and so the design team, program coordinator, and we all kind of just thought of a pink cherry blossom Japanese tree that goes to dark, and the cranes were suspended above the floor. So, when we were designing, we were like, we just want to have a really interesting look when we set up. And I thought the Z axis was really cool. So the staff and directors literally folded a ton of paper cranes, and we hung them on fishing line above the floor, and they transitioned in colors. So it's a very simple concept, exactly like you said it, and we wanted it to portray as light to dark. And we realized, later on, unintentionally, that some of our vertical moments had some of that more mature vertical effects, even though it was still simple, light to dark. You can do that at all levels of the program. It's just how you layer those skills. There are world-class programs that do light to dark. So that's where it's the tough part, is how does the meat and potatoes inside of it fit for the class?
Yeah. That's really, really great stuff right there. Cool. Well, let's transition a little bit to outdoor band or drum corps. You guys have both worked at Santa Clara Vanguard for a little while now, and then Stephen, you've been with Pacific Crest for quite some time. Pacific Crest, in my opinion, kind of had a breakout year. The last year we had Drum Corps 2019. And to me, it seemed like it was a really fresh show. A lot of what you guys did from an electronic standpoint felt really neat. Electronics, both audio and visually, with having the way that you guys integrated lights into the show. I mean, just really, really cool and really well done. Talk for a little bit kind of about what that team looks like and how the 2019 came to be, maybe what you did a little bit differently than in years past, or what you did the same and just made it better.
Yeah, so I'll start with the team there. So I'm the creative director there and the visual designer there. So I'm kind of the guy who brings the show to the table and we, with amongst the design team, we're able to pick at it, develop it. We also have John Zuniga, who is our music coordinator and front ensemble arranger. He's the guy that brings all of the electronics to life. Really, really good at what he does. We're very lucky to have him. We also have Ezekiel Lancer, who writes the percussion, the battery book. He's a UNT student, graduated way back when, and now he's worked with Vanguard and works at Pulse Percussion as well. And then we have Gabe Escobedo, who's the color guard director, the color guard caption head, and the visual coordinator. And we also have Tony Lyman, who is a creative type. We don't really have a specific name for what he does. He just provides ton of creative energy into the process.
Yeah,
we also have
Tony can do it all.
Yeah, he can do it all. That is for sure. And at some programs he does it all, and yep. So we're really lucky to have him as well. Brad Green was our brass arranger for this year or for that year, and he was new to the team as well. And then we also had Glenn Crosby, who was kind of, his official title is a program coordinator, but really he facilitated all of our conversations. He was the guy that we funneled all of our ideas through. And, he just has a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience, and he knows what he's talking about. And so within the design room, the way the discussions kind of work is oftentimes, we develop an idea, and we didn't have a title for this show initially. We didn't know what we were going to call it, but we had this concept that these triangular props that we talked about initially, they were kind of, and we wanted to leave it as open-ended as possible, just to not pin us down. But it was kind of like this gateway between what you are and what you feel, and so the whole concept Evergo came from this idea that we are a culmination of all of our previous experiences. And so as you kind of live through your life, you gain experiences that affect how you act later in life, whether it's, a relationship, a death in the family, different types of things, a job promotion, moving to a new city, all these new feelings. And so it provided us a diverse range of emotions that we can kind of access. And so with that idea, we kind of went to the drawing board to look for a diverse musical book. And I think the one thing that really connected everything was the electronic design and how that tied everything together. The goal when we started looking for music was really to make the music feel recognizable, even if you've never heard it. And so it was just a awesome musical palette throughout the whole show that made my job as a visual designer really easy. And so, at that point, we're just matching colors with feels. The music feels somber, so we put some somber colors out there. The music feels angsty, we put some aggressive colors out there. And so that was kind of the process in developing that. The way the team worked together was really, really fresh for me. I had been there for several years, and the addition of Gabe, he was the color guard guy. He was new to the team. Brad was new to the team. Glenn was new to the team. Tony was new to the team, and Ezekiel and Jonathan were both within their first 2 years of working with us. So, when you feel a synergy between the people that you're having conversations with within the design room, that's a really, really good thing. And it was a really special thing to have Glenn support us in the way he did and facilitate the conversations. And, we had this rule that we just don't say no to any idea, no matter if I'm bringing a music idea or the percussion writer is bringing a visual idea, it's just all on the table. And it really allowed us to have a creative space where anything it could go in the show. From the get-go, the one kind of aesthetic thing that I brought to the table is I wanted it to feel a little bit minimalist, in the sense that we wanted it to be clean cut. We wanted it to look fresh. We didn't want to pin ourselves to any specific thing. And so that's kind of where I brought the idea of having the front ensemble on the field. And we tested it out early January. And, there was just something that seemed, I want to say, a bit chaotic in its placement just out there on the field. And so when we really fine-tuned the icon, the triangular angles of the show in terms of its aesthetic, I thought maybe we put a tarp to kind of delineate that space on the field and make it more of a special place and a purposeful positioning out there. And so that was kind of what we ran with. And as we developed the show, again, my process in design is very similar, kind of across the board with wherever I come in person. And so there was a lot of experimentation, a lot of development, and you know, a lot of reacting to what things felt like they needed. You know, when it was a lot of this, we would start to design a little bit more of that. And then when it was a lot of that, we would start to design a little bit more of this. And so it kind of constantly changed and flowed in terms of the design. But the one constant was our ability to act in collaboration with one another and decide what was going to be in the show in August as a team. You know, for a while we had extra parts of the show, and you know, we just had feelings like this 30 seconds feels weird, you know, and we kind of let it be for a little bit, and then we just cut the whole thing out, and then we fixed the show, and we, you know, so again, kind of goes back to my point of never being married to any special thing, any specific thing. You know, we cut out a part of the music that I love, that Brad really did a great job designing, and we all felt really good about it. But then we had to cut that out. Now, obviously, we're all mechanics, we're all technicians, and we had to like put the pieces back together, make sure they fit. But I think that collaboration in the design room was really what set us apart from other years. Not to say that wasn't great collaboration years prior, because there were. It just felt like a really good synergy in the design room. And then to top that off, our teaching staff really knocked it out of the park. We opened up the responsibilities to the kids, to the members, and allow them to really step into the role that they were given. And, you know, we made a couple changes with the uniform, take the hat off, you know, really expose their face and their expression. And then the staff did an incredible job of training them to embody and understand the show. And then we just kind of let them loose. The last 3 weeks of tour were the most fun I had ever seen a group take the show, and like they didn't even need the staff at that point. They just took the show to the next level. And so, you know, call it a perfect storm, call it, you know, a planned approach. It was just a really collaborative and uplifting environment to be a part of all of that. So, you know, it was unfortunate that we had the 2020 season get cut short because we had a lot of special things in store, and we were really excited about what we had developed. But, you know, we're hoping that in 2021, we're able to come out and you know, kind of keep the momentum going and develop, you know, start where we ended up last year. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm super pumped to hopefully see what you guys are gonna bring to the table in 2021. I mean, I love the show in 2019. I mean, like you said, it was very like fresh, but at the same time familiar. Like the Everglow sample that you had in the beginning of the show. Like every time I heard that, I'm like, I know I've heard this before somewhere.
Right. Yeah, but
it wasn't from something, right? It was original.
Yeah. Well, we found this weird clip. I don't know. We'd have to really talk to John Zuniga to get the real details. But we did find this random clip somewhere, and it was so fitting. And it's, you know, a lot of times good design is a little bit serendipitous, where you find the thing, and then again, I'm not a musician. I don't know about keys or tones or chords or anything like that, but he stated that it was like in the same key, and it was like plug and play, like this will fit here perfectly. And he spent, you know, what seemed like 2.5 minutes of like, you know, pulling all the levers. And then suddenly it was in the show, and it was like, wow, this is all really, really good. Now, it wasn't without its bumps and bruises. We had a lot of issues early season with different things, and like trying to work out some color guard transition, you know, just the normal stuff. But I think what was really cool about the entire team is that we were relentless in the idea that we can make it better. We can make it better. We can make it better. And so we're tweaking all the way up until finals day, you know, and we're just trying to make all the adjustments possible. But like I said, the members were incredible to work with. The design team was really, really well they worked really well together, and there was tons of collaboration, and it was just a good time, you know. And I think that more than anything was a bit of the difference, you know. And so we're really excited to move into 2020, 2021 and beyond with the team and see what we can do.
Yeah. What's really cool is, over the course of the past couple of weeks of doing these with, week one, Brett Kuhn and Scott Coder, and last week with Shane Gwaltney and Matt Jordan and now with you guys, we're starting to see a lot of consistencies in terms of what makes these groups work really well together. And that's, trust really seems like, a fundamental pillar to that, of trust everyone that's on your team to do a great job and contribute what they're supposed to contribute to the show. But at the same time, like, check your ego at the door, and, good ideas can come from absolutely anywhere and make, a monumental moment in the show. And then, just really being open to everything. I think it's just really, really neat to hear, from these different teams that, I know you've worked together with Scott before, both of you guys at the Cavaliers and then at Santa Clara. There's some overlap there, but like, I don't know if you guys have ever worked with Shane and Matt at all, but it's just those principles of good collaboration and workflow seem to be consistent regardless of the specific team.
Yeah,
So,
that's I think trust is it for sure. You said a moment. I think Steven said something earlier, and you just hit on as well. In 2018 at Babylon at Vanguard, a lot of people talk about the horn snap in the ballad like that, and it's so funny because our fantastic design team spends hundreds of hours designing a show, and that's definitely not one of the things that they thought of or wanted to put in. It was like they trust the Vish staff to just fill in some things, and they give us guidance sometimes. Like Gaines made that a ripple, but we did the turnaround and the flip up. And when KK was, she was the tech that day at Sacramento that was like, I've got it figured out with the counts. Can I just do it? Yeah. How much time do you need? 30 minutes. Sure. Put it in. We'll try it out tonight. And we did it. And then next thing you know, like people, like that's a hashtag, and people are talking about the snap, and Haynes is texting me like, wow, I created this entire show and everyone's talking about the horn snap. So it is trust. It's trust on all levels. Trust from designers to instructors to performers, and as well as administration and volunteers. It really takes a full village of trust. And that I can speak, I don't teach at Pacific Crest, but I can speak for myself at Vanguard, that we have a family environment. And I think it's the same way there, that they're building that culture of like the caption heads and myself. We are like, we're best friends, and we want to teach together. And, that filters down, the staff hangs out with each other at Vanguard, no matter what you teach. Like, it's not the brass staff and then the guard staff and then the drum staff. Like, there's like 3 of everybody that goes to the coffee shop, and I think that bleeds into the membership as well. And I think that's part of their success as well, is that it came from the top down, and that every facet of the organization, is benefiting from that. And that, just trust and buy-in, and, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure the drums are the best out there. And if I need to make sure their feet are perfectly in time, and I need to make sure, Paul, what do you need from me as the visual person to make sure that you guys are successful? And we all have that. Like the guard and the drum line rehearses the most together at Vanguard. They call it drum ensemble. And it's crazy. Paul loves it. That's like a little secret to his magic, is like the guard and the drums will always have the stadium, and like the guard members feed off the energy of the percussion, and the percussion always feed off like the energy of the color guard there. And they do drum ensemble all the time. Now the guard doesn't like doing all the run throughs that Paul does. So he'll do like run through, and the guard's like panting and like dead after the first one. But that's the kind of thing where we just love teaching with each other, being with each other in the summer and whatnot throughout the whole season. So I think that when you watch it finals night or finals weekend, that you see that product, you can tell that it just fills through the DNA. And that's why there's extremely successful over long periods of time, groups like the Blue Devils. They finish each other's sentences, and there are teams of people who have been together for decades. And if I know exactly what he's going to say when he finishes that sentence, that's kind of where that synergy he's talking about, where a lot of groups that are successful have that. And I think that, you nailed it on the head with trust. I think that's perfect.
Yeah. So with all of that in mind, say I'm a upper division college student or a younger person that just graduated that's teaching band or maybe starting to dip their toe in the design world. What would you say are maybe 3 do's or could also be don'ts for someone that's trying to get to your guys' level or trying to take their program to the top level? Matt, you can go first.
Oh, gotcha. It's all you.
One thing that I learned a lot was to learn from failure. That was huge for me, and being aware and cognizant and taking time to learn from what didn't work. And I really study the craft of the art of what we do, not just my own work, but others, and having a critical eye of what I think didn't work for another program can still help me be better by watching someone else succeed or fail in what I feel as my opinion. And especially in my work, learning what I thought would be successful and wasn't. So that I go back to that first story of when I, put the drummers at a 1-step interval with drums on, and I learned from that, and it left a profound impact on me to just acknowledge and build off of my failures and to acknowledge my success as well. But the learning phase is really critical to learning what works for you and what works for the kids, what works for the program or the community or the pageantry world. And I think number 2, I would say always be a student. It's a little bit like the first one, but I think one thing I've learned from some really incredible designers and teachers and humans is that always be a sponge and just kind of, hire a great team of people around you to have them do their jobs and just learn from them. Like I've learned a lot from Paul Rennick, and I don't teach drums or music, but he's taught me so much about teaching, and I've learned a lot about even just drums. I used to teach with him as a Vish tech. Because I did indoor drum line, so I would be the battery Vish tech and he would run, and just watching him how he would call out music sections, like the furthest back priority is always the first, so he would have bass drums play and everyone else would like play on the rims and fit their part into that, and what is the priority of that musical language, and every
those
performer understood that. And I'm just always learning from different people and masterful skills of whatever it is they do, and that goes from everything in drum corps. Like that's uniforms, food, physical and mental health, to design, to education, to administration, volunteers, like learning from all of those people so that you can share that information is huge, and help your students. A first year teacher learning from people that you find as a mentor really helps. And Michael Gaines has been one for me that's really helped mentor me from a design perspective, so that I can one day share that with that information from him as well to other designers.
Yeah.
So being a sponge and learning and finding someone to be your mentor and creating a good relationship with them so that you can get honest feedback. And like I do that with Cadet Corps. I send him the drill at Cadet Corps at Vanguard Cadets, and every single time he's like, rewrite this, Matt. This is not what you want to send. So I rewrite something out there, and he tells me why things, he always is really complimentary in it, but like that looked awkward and I didn't think about that. But then when I do watch it, I'm like, wow, that is really awkward. So surrounding yourself with great people would be another tip. And I think the third one, for me personally, I harped on this earlier, but I think it's really important building a positive culture for your program or as a technician. Kind of framing your question, I think getting parents to buy in, administration to buy in, your staff to feel like they are important and they have a voice, and that your members feel the same way. Being a first year teacher, I personally was really upset anytime anyone made a mistake or something. I was really serious and into it. So just allowing people around you to do their jobs and coaching them and saying, hey, I noticed you probably went over time on this segment, just trying to help people be more successful, I think is a huge skill for a beginner person to understand and practice, because that's something we all still are trying to be better at, and how to use the resources around you and to build them up so that ultimately you will be successful, but your success is defined by the people around you, not what you individually do. So that's a huge one for me, is just culture and getting whatever facets of whatever that one program may need to be successful, whether it's the design team to feel appreciated, your instructional staff to feel like they're empowered and informed and just like ready to attack on the field, your administration to feel like you're a great ambassador of the school and the community and the city, and then your parents to feel like what you're doing for their students and their kids is making a great impact for them to be great adults.
Yeah.
So it's probably a lot, but those are my top 3 nuggets.
Yeah, I love all that. A phrase I love to live by is, a rising tide raises all boats. Yep. And, that really embodies a lot of what you just said. So that's really, really cool to hear. All right, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I think to start with like a couple do's, the first thing I would encourage young designers or young instructors to do is to ask questions. If you don't understand, ask. I can't tell you the number of people that were willing to answer a question that I had as I was a younger instructor or a younger designer. Mind you, it was my second year out of drum corps, and I was already the caption head at the visual caption head for the Cavaliers. And the people before me, Sly Sabelski and, Judd Merritt and Matt Hurd, and several people were so strong, and they were caption heads when I was in the ensemble. My perspective of them was that they were just a wealth of knowledge, and I internally knew that I didn't know as much as they did. I didn't have the experience that they did. But when I would turn to people and ask questions, there were so many people who were willing to give information that would help me in my situation. I can't tell you, like the first time I talked to Scott Coder, I'll see him, he comes out on tour, and then he's like, "Hey buddy," and I look at, what, we're buddies? Like, really, me? Like, I'm just the second year on staff. But it's surprising how many people are out there willing to help and willing to support you in whatever it is that you're doing. So reach out and ask questions about what you don't know, ask questions about what you don't understand, ask questions about what you want to be better in, ask people to critique your work, like Matt said. So that's a really, really important thing, whether it's wrong or right. Ask why it was good, ask why it was bad. I think that's really, really helpful. The second thing is diversify, really understanding that our activity is more similar than it is different. So myself being a brass player, have benefit a ton from watching color guard and watching drumline and teaching drumline and understanding what makes that be successful and what makes this successful, and not just limiting myself to what I think I know, my strengths or whatever. I think the more you diversify, the more variety of information you get, the better of a designer you are across the board. I think that it helps knowing that one skill set, maybe in the color guard world, can affect the brass movement people. And then the brass can help, the percussion timing from musical percussion, the percussion section can help. It's just all information that is so homogenous in more ways than we realize. So diversifying yourself, I think, is really, really important. Not being stuck to the thing that you feel comfortable doing. And that leads me to my last thing. Step out of your comfort zone. Don't feel worried about running with an idea that you feel a little bit of conviction behind. I can't tell you the number of times that I took a chance on, an idea that I had, and I just threw it out there, and you start to see that people appreciate it. The judge community sees it and understands it and values it. And
we try to anyway.
Yeah, they try to, right. But I think no one's going to say that's a terrible idea. You try, and worst case scenario, you try something, it doesn't work out, and then you learn from that, like Matt said. But there's times where I'm like, hey, I want to put 10 bicycles on the field with a small marching band, and we want to zip around. It's like, suddenly that's a strange idea, and it pays out, and if you have that conviction behind your idea or your thought, see it through, like get it all the way out there, make it what you intend it to be. And so for a lot of younger designers that I've worked with, or a lot of younger teachers that, ask me for some help or some assistance in their design process, they say, hey, can you help me with this? And I say, well, what's your idea? Like, what do you think it should be? And then we start there, because the last thing I want to do is take their idea away and say, no, it's not going to work. Here's this idea that I promise you will work. I want to allow them to grow in whatever it is that they see appropriate, the same way I look up to my mentors and try to grow based off of their input. So if you have an idea, follow it through, see it through, and make sure that it becomes the thing that you have in mind. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like Matt said, learn from your mistakes. So those are the do's that I would definitely encourage younger designers and younger instructors to kind of follow.
Yeah, that's a lot of great information there. I mean, stepping out of your comfort zone and trying to look at things from a different perspective, or expose yourself to things that you wouldn't ordinarily do or gravitate towards, I think is so crucial to becoming a more well-rounded person and just taking in different ideas, seeing how things are done a little bit differently. So that's really great. Well, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for taking some time out of your day. And I know it's a little early out there on the West Coast. Hopefully you guys still have time to go grab some dinner over there on 2nd Avenue.
Yeah.
But before we get out of here, do you guys have anything going on that you want people to know about? Are there virtual programs at Pacific Crest or Santa Clara Vanguard that people can check out? Like, what do you guys have going on?
Well, at Pacific Crest, we have a virtual masterclass where we're starting to compile tons of resources for individuals to sign up for. You pay a small fee, and then you get access to this library of different information, which kind of goes to my point of diversifying. So I would encourage everyone to check that out. It's going to be available very, very soon. In terms of my own projects, just keep an eye out for 2021 Pacific Crest. We're going to be doing a lot of fun things, a lot of cool things, and hopefully, if this drum corps thing gets back off the ground, we'll be able to really show the whole world what we have in store for 2021. If you'd like, you could follow me on Instagram at Estudillo, and you can also follow my Facebook page. Yeah, that's kind of, my wife came up with that. It's really clever.
I like it.
Or you can also check me out on Facebook at Steven Estudillo Designs. So
nice. Matt?
Yeah, right now I'm working on a personal project for some band directors and visual instructors with a program called Knack and Grind, which one of my good friends, Justin Mabry, has created. And there's
I marched with him in 2006.
Yeah, wow.
Carolina Crown.
Yeah, so he has been doing theme park shows recently and has a whole world into that. But I'm doing a visual course, and we're covering everything. Stationary as one course, marching techniques is another, and the third course is going to be a really deep dive into the dot system. So if anyone's really interested in why do the dot people feel like the dot is the way, dot or form, right? That's the question. Well, a lot of people don't understand why as dot people believe what we do to believe in the dot system. So I'm going to break down the entire dot system with drone video footage and really nerdy detail exercises, and why and how we look at the field and how we teach the dot system. So we've already filmed 2 of the 3 episodes, and then we're looking to put out different virtual or in-person content, and that'll come out in the spring, ready for 2021 season. So all of that will be on my website, as well as the indoor drumline show that we talked about earlier is on my website, matthartwelldesign.com. So you can check it out there.
All right. Well, fantastic. Well, again, thank you guys so much. I mean, just like a wealth of knowledge here. So I'm so thankful to have been able to pick your guys' brain and learn about what it is that you guys do. And thank you for taking some elementary questions from a pit guy such as myself. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else did as well. For those watching, make sure to tune in to Workshop Wednesday, week 4 next week. We are keeping it on the West Coast. We're going to talk to one of the most famous people, or most famous person in the marching arts, at least on the drumline side of things, Mr. Scott Johnson. And with him is going to be Brian Dinkle. We're going to be talking about the Blue Devils. We're going to be talking about RCC percussion and learning more about what these Cali guys do to bring the heat every single year. So without any further ado, thank you guys again for joining. Thank you guys for tuning in, and looking forward to seeing everybody next week. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.